Hey everyone! So in this section of the course, we're going to be updating the app to be visually more pleasant. Think of it this way. Think of it like we have the app over here and we have all of our code. And the company Meals to Go, they went and they hired a designer, and the designer comes in and they start clicking around the app. They start trying to order things. They go through and try out the app left, right, and center, and they get angry. They're like, this is inconsistent. What is this color pattern? Why is there orange and blue? What is going on here? And you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, I'm going to have to rebuild the entire app. And so the designer goes away and puts together some design recommendations for us. And we look over them and we realize to ourselves, I built this app pretty amazingly because all of these changes that they're proposing, I can do them fairly easily. And so you pat yourself on the back and you think to yourself, well, I wrote my code well, I structured my code well, I have a theme, and all of the criticism is basically on small visual changes that we can tweak within a day. And that's when you know you've built an application that can scale, because you can make those changes easily. And so let's go through some of those changes. So the designer comes to you and says, hey, Mo, in my case, Mo, or in your case, whatever your name is, but hey, Mo, I get that, you went for a different color pattern, but you have orange tabs, you have a purple menu, and you have blue buttons. I really like the purple. Could we just stick with the purple? And you're like, we sure can. So we go over to our colors.js and we look at our brand colors, and they say, oh, okay, you set up a theme. You set this up with a proper brand strategy. Okay, so could we change the primary color to 696A C3? And that will allow us a deep, nice purple. And for the secondary color, how about we go with a 5D 6CC6, and they're speaking to us in hex code because I guess that's how designers speak, but you get it and you fill it in, and now you go into your app and you say, oh, now everything that I did as brand primary blue is purple, and the buttons are purple, and if we go over here, oh, we're missing an avatar. So we quickly go over to our settings screen and we say to ourselves, oh, our avatar icon has a background color that is not set to a color. So we quickly go and say colors.brand.primary, and we import colors over here. So we say import colors from infrastructure/theme/colors. And by doing that, now if we go to the settings screen, that's set up to be consistent. Oh, but our tab menu is also not consistent. So we go to App Navigator and we say, well, let's import colors here as well. So we import colors from ... infrastructure theme, and then we say colors. And then over here, we say that, well, what colors should we pick? So we go down here and we say, when it's active, let's do colors.brand.primary. And then when it's inactive, let's do colors.brand.muted. And if we go look at that, what we can see is that the muted color is kind of in line. It's kind of a pastel blue that bleeds into the purple, and the designer's like, well, that looks pretty nice. That's pretty decent. And so the app is now fully, well, I guess you could call it purpleized. And so if we log out, we can also see that our buttons are now purple, all of our buttons. And just with those simple changes, we changed the whole aesthetic of our app with no code at all. We created consistency when we thought there was none possible. When we were freaking out, remember when we were freaking out in the previous video? I was freaking out in the previous video, but it was this simple to change everything. And it was no sweat at all. That's what happens when you set up your code for scale, and it's amazing. Okay, so now that we have that going for us, What's going on over here in the cart? Well, let's quickly fill in an order. Let's do Mobini, and let's quickly do a payment. And we can see that when we pay, an error is happening and everything is working as intended, and the other icons will automatically turn to purple. And our map still works as intended. Everything is good. Just a small couple tweaks to the code, and we have created beautiful consistency. The designer comes back over and they say, hey Mo, the settings screen looks a bit sad like this. Could we add the same background that we currently have on the login and register screens? Because those look pretty good. And you say, sure we can. So you log in quickly. And then what you do is you go look at the code and you say to yourself, in the settings screen, all I need to do is mimic what we had on the login screen. That's pretty easy. So what you do is you say const settings background is equal to a styled.image background, same that we had. And then you say attributes, because we're going to set the attributes ahead of time. And we'll take in the source. And we say that is a require of ... assets / and then we'll say that it is home_background.jpg. And by having that, now what we need to do is we'll say set the position to absolute. Let's remove this right here. Set the position to absolute, set the height to 100%, set the width to 100%. And then once we have that, what we can do is we can go and put the settings background around the safe area view. So we'll do this. And what we can do here is just quickly wrap this. And boom, if we go look at our settings screen, oh, that doesn't seem to be working, does it? Something must be going wrong here. Well, let's quickly reload this and double check what's happening. So if we go over here, for some reason, the safe area must be overriding what's happening here. But what happens if we put settings background right inside of here and not around the safe area? Well then it loads, but it's not taking up the actual full height of everything. So what happens if we kind of do it like this, where we wrap the safe area like that, and we put the settings background on the top? Oh, well, that still isn't working. So what if we put it at the bottom? Oh, well, now it's rendering over top of everything. That's not really what we want, now is it? So what we need to do is we need to put our safe area back around everything, and we'll put our settings background like this. We'll wrap everything once more, but instead of using a traditional safe area, what we're going to do is we're going to create something called a transparent safe area. And so what that's going to be is it's going to be a new const, right? Transparent safe area, where we take a styled safe area and we adjust it a bit. So how are we going to adjust this? Well, we're going to say background color transparent. All right. And once we do that, what happens here is we actually load our settings view with the proper background right over here. Now, does this look amazing? Well, I think it does. Maybe it could use a little bit of extra definition to separate out the icons. What do you think? So what we do is we say, well, maybe our settings item needs a background color. So we say background color, and then we say RGBA 255, 255, 255, and then we'll add 0.4. And by doing this, okay, now there's a bit of definition between them. And what we can say here is that between the settings items, we'll add a spacer. And by adding a spacer, now there's a bit of space between them. So now this looks like a legitimate view that has a bit of definition. There's a bit of contrast between the background and the items. But then the designer comes to you and they say, Mo, I really aren't we building the payment and the past order soon? Aren't those coming pretty soon? And you say, yeah, those are coming pretty soon. Well, could we put the items in the list just so that we know? And you say, sure we can. We definitely can. And so what we do is we go ahead and we add some more items with spacers between them. And instead of them calling on logout, we temporarily make them call null. And by calling null, now they are able to kind of be on the screen, add some more real estate, but we need to change them up. So what we say here is that for this one, we're going to call it past orders, or let's call this one payment. And then when we call it payment, what we're going to give it is the icon of the cart. And so here's where you'll be able to manage your payment down the line. And then here we'll say past orders. And when we do past orders, what we'll do is we'll implement a icon called history. And by implementing history, now we can see our past orders and our payment. All right. So now we know that when we go to this screen, that we have all of these menu items to click on. Now these two don't do anything right now. Of course, logout is going to log me out. I accidentally click that. And so the last thing the designer asks you to do on the screen is they find that the colors are a bit stark. The black is a bit stark here. So they want the favorites to be colors.ui.error so that it's a nice red. And then they ask, hey, for the blacks, could we use the UI secondary color? And you say, yeah, sure we can. So we go ahead and we remove the color and we say colors.ui.secondary. And this allows us a much nicer, much more toned down look and feel. The designer comes back to you and says, hey, for the restaurant info card, could we adjust that a bit? Because I don't like the way that it's filling in the entire width. And you're like, sure we can. So what you do is you go to restaurant info card styles, and we're looking at the restaurant card. And you say, what exactly do you want? Well, shorten it a bit. So you say, okay, width 95%. All right. So we do that, and let's align it to the center, align self-center. And so now it's aligning itself perfectly in the center. The designer's like, yeah, that looks much better. And then they ask you, hey, on this detail screen, right? On the detail screen, could you adjust the dividers between the different menu items? And you're like, sure. So you go and you research and you find that React Native Paper has a divider item. And so we go, and what we do is between each accordion, we decide that we're going to put a divider, right? So we put a divider between the items right here. And by doing that, now every item inside the menu has a divider, but subsequently we also put them between the accordions. So by doing that, now we can create logical groupings between each and every section, as well as each and every individual item inside of the menu. So we'll put them between the accordions and put them between each and every menu item. There we go. And then right here between coffee, tea, Modelo, Coke, and there we go. And by doing this, we now have dividers dividing up very lightly the menu to create this nice flow of the UI so that we have a clear separation of items between groups and otherwise. Awesome. All right, that was simple enough. No huss, no fuss. Now they come back and they say, hey, well, the restaurant info card component, right? Restaurant info card. Well, this component is basically elevating, and I don't like how far the drop shadow is. Could you lessen that? So you say, yeah, sure. Let's just put it to 2. And by setting it to 2 and quickly refreshing, we quickly notice that the bleed is way less. And they're like, ah, that looks amazing, crisp. They're also like, hey, the map screen. So you go to the map screen. Could you zoom in a bit more? And you say, well, I've researched this for a long time, and the lowest delta we could give it is 0.01, which is potentially a bit closer, but not by much. And so they're like, okay, that's fine. How about looking at the cart? You're like, well, what about the cart? So you look at the checkout screen and you're like, what about the cart's wrong? And so, you quickly notice, we forgot something here, just the code wise. You're like, we forgot to add a key. So you say key is equal to, and then you say item dash I, and you quickly add the index here. And so another React warning gone. Not really something the designer was concerned with, but you noticed it because you were looking at the code. And so they're like, well, in the checkout, could we potentially add a divider before the name input? You're like, sure we can. So you go ahead and from React Native Paper, you grab the divider. And down here by the name input, right here, they say, okay, add the divider. So you add it, and there you go. The visualization is there. They're like, could you add a bit more spacing? And you're like, sure I can. I have a spacer. So you quickly put a spacer before the divider, and they're like, okay, that looks much better. Great. That looks clean. And you're like, thank you. So then they're looking at the favorites screen, right? The favorites bar rather. And they're looking at it and they're asking themselves, hey, well, when I add favorites, when I look at the favorites bar, it's kind of weird that it's breaking the UI while we're scrolling, right? That shouldn't happen, right? And so you go ahead and you think to yourself, how am I going to fix that? Well, you go to the favorites bar. And you think to yourself, well, right now the favorites wrapper is a view. Okay. Well, let's get React Native Paper in here. Maybe I can use something from there. So you go ahead and you test something out. You say, well, let's grab a card. And you say, well, let's wrap styled with card instead. And we'll leave the padding. We'll add a Z index of 999. And you put an elevation of 3. And so they go ahead and they look at it and they're like, that divide is way nicer. At least I can see now where the favorites bar begins and ends. Great. But could you potentially add some rounding to the corners? And you say, sure. So you do a border radius of 15 pixels rather. And so at that point, the rounding is happening here very subtly in the corners to create even more visual separation. And they say, that looks great. That looks pretty good. Amazing. Just with those couple of lines of changes, we've visually re-interfaced our app almost, right? The purple theme, the small adjustments here and there, and that is what good UI setup allows you to do.